In this video, I'm going to show you how to publish a web application using Microsoft's Internet Information Services version 10, also known as IIS Server. To make it easier, we will use an example of a typical LAN architecture. The architecture is of the client-server type, that is, it is a distributed application architecture, consisting of 2 computers and a smartphone. As we are using a local network, it is necessary that all devices connected to the network have the same network address. So, in our example, an IP was assigned to each device connected to the network. The runtime machine, that is, the server machine, will be responsible for running ADISRA SmartView in runtime mode, as well as where the web server will be. The viewer machine, that is, the client machine, will be responsible for showing the application through an internet browser, such as Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, and others. And finally, the smartphone will be responsible for showing the application through the ADISRA SmartView application. To publish an application on the web, it is necessary to use a web server. The web server is responsible for storing, processing, and delivering the requested information to the client viewer. Therefore, the process of publishing an application, developed in ADISRA SmartView, involves some steps that will be shown in this video. So let's get started with the settings. First, you will need to have Windows IIS Web Server installed. By default it is not installed. So installing IIS, you will need to access the control panel. The control panel is a component of Microsoft Windows that provides the ability to view and change system settings. There are several ways to access the control panel. One way is to open it in the Start menu. Click the bottom left Start button to open the Start menu. Type Control Panel in the search box and select Control Panel in the results. Or another way is to click the File Explorer icon on the taskbar, select Desktop and double-tap Control Panel. Once in the Control Panel, click Add and Remove Programs. Then click on the Turn Windows Features On or Off option. Make sure all features under Internet Information Services and Microsoft.NET Framework are selected. Click OK to install selected Windows components, including IIS. Wait for the installation. If an error occurs during installation, try installing again. Ready. Now the web server is installed. To make sure that the web server was installed correctly, open your internet browser and in the browser type, localhost. If this screen does not appear, the web server was not successfully installed, so try to install it again. Now let's open the web server. Note that the web server is not running any applications. Well, after installing the web server, let's open ADISRA SmartView by double-clicking on the ADISRA SmartView desktop icon or click the Start button and search for ADISRA SmartView. Here we have an example application, which is composed of a screen showing the status of a valve. And according to our architecture, this screen should be shown on the viewer machine and on the smartphone. Well, to generate a screen that will be displayed on the web, we need to generate the screen as HTML. If you want to generate a single screen as HTML, right-click on the specific screen and click Save HTML. If you want to save all the application screens, right-click on the graphics document and then click on the Save HTML option. Now, if you want to generate only the open screens in HTML, select the option Save all open screens for the web. This option is also available on the icon shown above and on the button on the side. The web settings can be found under the Web button located in this Settings menu. In the Tag Server option, it defines whether the web server is on the local machine or on a remote machine. This field enables the use of the HTTPS protocol. The port field defines which port will be used to communicate the HTML screens with the runtime. And finally, the Default Web Folder button defines where the HTML screens will be generated. By default, screens will be generated in the default folder on the IIS server. In our example architecture, the setting is as shown. Now, let's generate the application's only screen. After clicking on Save HTML, a progress bar is shown in the bottom bar of the engineering environment. Let's check if the screen was generated successfully. As you can see, ADISRA SmartView generated the screen we wanted in HTML. Now, let's open the IIS server and check if the screen is already running on the server. The IIS server found the folder generated by ADISRA SmartView. To check if the IIS server is running the screen, click on the Default Website item. As you can see, the server is running. Now, let's go back to the engineering environment and start the runtime. The runtime and the local viewer have been started. Let's open Data Watcher to simulate the status of the valve. We will also open an internet browser to finally view the application on the web. The application address is composed by the IP of the machine, where the web server is running. As we are accessing the web application from the same machine, we will use the localhost IP. Then the generated HTML screen path. Let's change the status of the valve and check if the viewer is working correctly. As you can see, it is working. Now, to view the application through the viewer machine or any other machine connected to the local network, make sure that all the machines are in the same network address. Open the internet browser, and in my example I will be entering the following address. Note that the IP used in the application address is the IP of the machine where the web server is located, configured in the example architecture. It is worth noting that each viewer session, that is, a viewing session, will consume one of your viewer licenses. Whether it is the local viewer, remote viewer, or web viewer on a computer, cell phone, or table, it is considered to be a viewer session. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, for the runtime machine and the viewer machines to establish communication, it is necessary that all the machines have the same network address and each machine has an IP address. To configure the IP of a machine, access the control panel. Click on the option Network and Internet, Network and Sharing Center, and then select the type of physical network. In my example, I am using Ethernet network. Click on Property. And now open the IPv4 option Properties. Select the option. Use the following IP address. In the first field, define the IP of the machine. Now in the fields below, put it according to the example. ADISRA SmartView allows viewing a web application on a smartphone, through an internet browser or using the ADISRA application. To install the ADISRA app, follow these steps. Download the app via the link available in the video description. Then make sure the smartphone is on the same local network as the IIS server. Open the ADISRA app. In the first field, put the address of the web application. Then choose Landscape or Portrait Orientation. Below it is possible to define the dimensions and margin of the screen. The Clear Cache button clears the browser cache. And in the last field, the last established connections are shown. Now, click on the Play button. If I change the status of the valve through the Data Watcher, located in the runtime machine, the status must change in all viewers. And as you can see, it changes on all our viewer sessions. If you want to view the application from a machine located outside the local network, you will need to enable TCP port 9003 traffic on the runtime machine and configure the NAT protocol on the router. While the switch is responsible for creating and managing a local network, the router is responsible for connecting the local network with the Internet. As the NAT protocol configuration depends on the router model and manufacturer, I will only show you how to enable port 9003. So, please refer to the user guide for your router to configure the NAT protocol. Accessing the runtime machine, open the control panel. Click on the Security and System option and then click on the Firewall option. Then, in the left menu, click on the Advanced Settings option. Firewall rules define what type of Internet traffic is allowed or blocked on each TCP port. Note that by default, port 80, used by the web server, is already enabled. So let's enable port 9003. You will need to create input and output rules. To do this, with the input rule selected, click on New Rule. Select the port option. Enter port 9003. Select the Allow Connection option. And then put a name for the inbound rule. The inbound rule for port 9003 is enabled. Now we need to create the outbound rule. Select the outbound rule and click on the New Rule option. Select the port option. Enter port 9003. Select the Allow Connection option. And then put a name for the outbound rule. Outbound rule for port 9003 is enabled. Now, you only need to configure the router NAT protocol and have a dedicated IP4 communication. Thanks for watching until the end. Visit the ADISRA website for more information or contact the info@adisra.com or the sales team.